Mercy. Mercy. There's no mercy.
Hello, my fellow hunters of Sunbreak. Today is something I always like to do when a new Monster Hunter demo comes around, as a new game is looming. Suspenseful looming noises logo. See what I mean? And that is, well, essentially have a look at how the speedrunners are handling each weapon, in the sense that, hey, they're the best players of the game, of each weapon. How fast are they killing Malznoe, our big bad boy? I should not, he's a deadly, like, edgy vampire dragon, big bad boy, what the fuck? In any case, and get a kind of ranking comparison power gradient between, well, the fastest killing weapon and the slowest killing weapon. It's definitely fun, and it definitely tells us a lot, and it's a helpful kind of data metric, but that said, it's not perfect. Obviously, we have ourselves the fact that there's no skills, there's no builds, and some weapons benefit from a build a hell of a lot than others, such as, you know, bowguns actually being able to build around a specific ammo, for example, or hunting horns getting actually a good song selection, or at least a more optimum one, so on and so forth. But it's still good to see what the new Sunbreak abilities are actually doing for overall weapon power. I've also asked you guys which weapon you're having the most fun with, and we'll get to those results too and compare them to which weapons are coming out on top power-wise, as I think that's quite a curious little comparison. And, of course, as always, the disclaimer is, if you have had fun and quest complete drops down, well then you're using the perfect weapon for you. Monster Hunter, honestly, on the whole, is a very, very well-balanced game. Okay, joking aside, it is. It just is. There's always been a strongest, there's always been a weakest, but there's very rarely a hilarious outlier not named something like Kelby Bow, at least compared to other games. So obviously always just use whatever speaks to you in that way that only the perfect weapon can. And lastly, check out every single one of the speedruns that I will be referencing today. They're all linked down below and all publicly available on, well, the Rise Speedrun ranking dedicated website, which I will also pop down below. In any case, without further ado, let's see how the weapons fare. Coming in at 14th is Hunting Horn. Yeah. So, I should say, the slowest weapon, Hunting Horn, is 8 minutes 43. The fastest weapon when we get to it is 6 minutes 20. A 2-minute-ish spread for a demo is actually pretty good, and that's really encouraging. But Hunting Horn here, again, is suffering from not having ideal song choices, and definitely suffering from not having a build, and I think ultimately is just a weapon that seems to be struggling against Malznoe. I say struggling relative to speedrunners, but other than that, I am not the most Hunting Horn of people, but I do know Hunting Horn is nearer the bottom end in actual current Rise 2, so I guess in that sense it makes sense it's fallen here as well in Sunbreak, but I also think it's got a lot to gain from its full roster of new abilities going into the full game. Ultimately, someone has to be down here, and now it's, well, the Doot Stick. Then coming in at 13th with a time of 8 minutes exactly is Sword and Shield. This one kind of makes sense to me, as I think Sword and Shield is very build dependent. Of course, you can build it in a few ways. You can go raw, you can go element, and I think ultimately in the demo set with a standard build, there's simply just not the kind of raw damage output to take advantage of the openings that Sword and Shield can gain. You're not really gaining damage from the switch skills, especially the new one itself, as opposed to something like Greatsword, which is actively being powered up by the new switch skill they get to play with, which is then, you know, permeated throughout the hunt and really speeds up the time. So yeah, this one, just a case of, well, really needs a proper build. In any case, next up in 12th place, we have ourselves Lance at 7 minutes 54. Honestly, I kind of always expect Lance to be at the bottom of lists like these, so well done, Lance! Yeah! Woo! But For realsies, I mean, Lance has always been a fairly low output weapon compared to the others, made up for in its, Iron Turtle ignoring the monster nature, but it's just raw output. Yeah. Bear in mind though, of course, this demo is not on the balancing that the final game will be on. There will still be tweaks, there will still be weapons adjusted one way or the other. This really is a lesson, or at least a investigation in how the pure new Sunbreak switch skill actually does for the weapon in terms of its rankings and against, of course, the Sunbreak flagship. So, yeah, Lance down here. Then we have the light bowgun at 7 minutes 49. This is very self-explanatory. I mean, it's not completely last, but again, it's light bowgun. You need to be able to have your item loadout, you need to be able to craft more ammo, you need to have a specific ammo, you need to specifically build around it. A kind of generic bowgun set doesn't really exist, and this is very much a case of doing the best you can with what you have. And, well, in that case, it's still quite impressive, but of course, it can get a lot better than this, and it will do, as evidenced by light bowgun being one of the best weapons in base Rise. Then, just a tiny bit faster, we have ourselves dual blades at 746. This, again, is very, very build heavy, because obviously you want to be having a proper elemental dual blade set to properly elementally counter the monster that you're facing, along with a hell of a lot of stamina skills to help manage everything, and generally there is a lot of boxes to check when properly sorting out your dual blades. That said, the new silkbind is an incredibly high DPS tool by all accounts, and definitely is help contributing to them finishing at the very least this high up, or at least not too low down when it comes to these rankings. There is a lot of potential for dual blades come the full game. The ceiling is very high, and I for one cannot wait to see how high it actually is. And then we find ourselves Hammer 1 second faster at 745, smashing in. This one is simply a just solid fine time to be clocking in here, and let's be honest, none of these times are anywhere approaching the level of bad. Hammer was quite middling in base Rise 2, so it being middling again here also is fairly reasonable, and it also still has a lot to gain from missing silkbinds that Sunbreak is going to give it, at least the other one that we know about, and then of course there's still the mystery third that we need to, get our hands on and actually see for all the weapons, but the point being is Hammer is a very straightforward weapon. It doesn't need a specific build, but at the same time, it's not got anything that's kind of unfair level, which I would argue a few of the weapons as we go up this list actually do. So, yeah. Next up then is Insect Glaive at 731. Insect Glaive is getting very, very good. Awakened Kinsect Attack is a much needed high damage potent tool that really ups the Insect Glaive's arsenal and has a proper just boom moment that with proper management you can frequently make happen for you, and it's just really, really good to see. Genuinely, it is a massively fun attack, and it is paying dividends here as we see it absolutely annihilate Malznoe to give Insect Glaive a higher finish in the Sunbreak demo than it has on average in base Rise. That's really nice. Next up then, we have the heavy bowgun at 6 minutes 54. This is quite the big jump now. We have lost over 35 seconds from the last entry, and it's easy to see why. Despite not having a proper actual ammo-focused setup, the heavy bowgun that we do have access to isn't really all that bad. The cluster ammo certainly doing a lot of work. And Wyvern Heart, as always, being an absolutely ridiculous damage tool if used and timed correctly to get its full power out. But the interesting thing is heavy bowgun's time here is probably just a symptom of heavy bowgun being heavy bowgun and being really good, one of the best weapons in base Rise, arguably the best. And that's because the new silkbind isn't actually really being used in the speedrun. It's just good heavy bowgunness, and that's certainly something to think about. Next up then on our list to find the best, we have Charge Blade also at 654, so technically tying with a heavy bowgun here, but this is also nice to see, as Charge Blade was fairly low down in base Rise, but now it's definitely gotten a bump from its sunbreakiness, adding that extra layer that I think the weapon really needed. And while there is still a little bit of about Charge Blade when it comes to Sunbreak, I certainly think the new move that we got teased recently is definitely going to be something very special, so basically watch this space. Then we have ourselves the Switch Axe at 6 minutes 48, and watching Switch Axe is just awesome. The new counter gives them so much more uptime, so much more pressure they can apply to the monster, and it just lets them be so much more aggressive with so much more damage, and it's easy to see how that has resulted in one of the best times in the demo, despite being one of the weaker weapons in base Rise, and it really is a joy, and I am so happy for every Switch Axe main. It's just, it's such a good weapon now. I mean, I've always loved it, but yes! Then as we head towards the tippy top of demo crushing, we get ourselves Longsword with 6 minutes 36. Longsword, of course, I mean, it's Longsword. Demo or not, you can counter-destroy a monster back to back to back with impunity, and Harvest Moon just amping that up to be even more monstrous only helps. Honestly, though, I expected Longsword to be higher than 4th, which does of course say a lot about Longsword, but I think the issue here is that the Harvest Moon is a little bit more limited of a power bump than, say, Strongarm stances for Greatsword, just because of the zone you have to stay in, and if the monster doesn't play ball. But at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, again, it's Longsword, and it's Longsword but better, and it's Longsword but better competing against weapons that don't have perfect builds yet, whereas Longsword, even naked, can still be Longsword, and therefore it goes a long way to swording the enemy to death. Then in a strong 3rd place, so with 6 minutes 30, it is Bow. This on one hand makes sense, because Bow is arguably the strongest weapon in base Rise, but it also is a weapon that's very, very build dependent, though perhaps dependent's the wrong word. It's very, very build helped. It scales probably better than most weapons in the game when everything lines up, but at the same time, the pure moveset and playstyle of Bow is such that if you're really on it, know what you're doing, you're essentially constantly damaging the monster. Every single second, just shot after shot after shot as you dodge through everything that it does and just keep up the pressure. And it seems to me that, well, Bow is here by virtue of being Bow, not by virtue of being Sunbreak Bow, which is a little bit sad, but at the same time, the Sunbreak Bow shenanigans certainly is very, let's say, nicher than a lot of other weapons, so I'm very curious to see how that actually ends up developing into the full game. That said, it's still my second favourite weapon, and I cannot wait to have a proper go with the full potential of it in real Sunbreak. Then the mightiest and besterest weapon doth come at Greatsword with 6 minutes 19 seconds. Oh, that's a scorcher. I just said, ooh, that's a scorcher. Ooh, that's a scorcher. What am I doing? In any case, strong arm stance, hysteria, whatever you want to call it, the new counter is ludicrously good. You just get to sit there, charging, counter the monster's attack, and then hit it with a 35% powered up true charge over and over and over again, resulting in silly damage. And this, again, is in an unoptimized set in a demo. And honestly, I want to go into this more when I can actually properly give Greatsword a proper test, but I have a suspicion that Focus might finally not be a mandatory skill on Greatsword, simply because Strong Arm Stance lets you just skip into a fast true charge anyway, and you're not really gaining as much value as you once were with Focus, and that's very, very interesting. But bottom line is, we have a demo monster that lets us really abuse its timings with punishes that do, well, 35% increased damage on the most damaging attack in the game. It's kind of silly and very expected that Greatsword is way up here, especially in this kind of testing environment. The surprise, though, is in first place, 1 second faster, 6:18, is Gunlance.
Yes! 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 Yes!
I know! A couple reasons for this. Well, literally 2 reasons for this. Number 1, it is a demo environment, and gunlance perhaps is the weapon least affected by not having a proper build in the way that it damages monsters. So it gets to compete very healthily against all the other weapons that are also just having to make do with what they've been given. But, of course, more importantly than that, the just fire all of the things ability is very, very much potent. It takes some setting up, you can't just pop it off willy-nilly, but bullet barrage is doing work, and that work is evident to see with our gunlance times here, and that's very, very exciting. Honestly, I really am happy for gunlance players everywhere. It is super cool to see a weapon go from, well, let's be honest, one of the, if not the weakest weapon in base Rise to dominating the demo. Whether that will keep translating over to the real game when builds are actually there is another question entirely, but it's very fun to see just how effective gunlance, especially with bullet barrage, is being against Malznoe. So there you have it, guys. This is your weapon speedrun power rankings for the demo. A very interesting list. And this, if I put it up next to it, is your vote response to me asking you which weapon you are finding most fun. And it's definitely curious. There's a few little overlaps, but at the same time, the actual gunlance is way up, so that makes sense. The insect glaive is way up because the new attack is awesome. Greatsword, yes, the counter on switch X, but then you have the bowguns and the bow as weapons that are largely playing how they used to play, just now in a Sunbreak demo, are where you'd expect them to be. So yeah, you draw what conclusions you would like to draw from this, but I have had a lot of fun comparing and contrasting the weapon winners on an entertainment level and the weapon winners on a power level. I think that's always interesting and definitely a metric worth having a talk on. Basically, though, how are you finding it? Are you surprised by said power rankings? Are you impressed or disappointed? Or are you satisfied with your main weapon and how it's doing, both in your hands and in the hands of the best users of it? I would love to know your thoughts. For now, though, I hope you've had fun with this most of all. Like you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more Sunbreak goodness. Consider supporting the future of this channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.